Welcome to our next edition of the Foundation Speaker Series. My name is Karen Musanti, and today I am honored to be joined by Mr. Stephen Higgins. Steve is the Managing Director at Delancey Street Partners. In short, he is an investment banker. He has more than 20 years of diverse transaction experience, including mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, financing, and other advisory assignments. His clients include entrepreneurs, privately held companies, financial sponsors, and larger public and private corporations. He serves on the board of directors of Mainline Health and is an active member of the Philadelphia chapter of the Association for Corporate Growth. Steve is originally from New York, but calls Philadelphia his home now. Quite honestly, I could go on for 5 or 10 more minutes about all the things that Steve has done, but I'm going to allow him a little bit of time to talk about his background. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Karen, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I said that your career is an investment banker, and we spoke prior to this, and I said to you that the term investment banker for younger people, and really, honestly, for many adults, may be a very foreign term. So I'm wondering if you could take a little bit of time to just describe what an investment banker does.
Absolutely. And the way I'll do it is I'll try to explain it the way I try to explain it to my parents, who still really don't understand, what I do. So we'll give this a shot. Maybe I do a better job this time. So as an investment banker, I work with a lot of privately held businesses that are where the owners may be thinking about selling their company. And the reason they might want to sell their company is because, a lot of their net worth is tied up in that business, and they get to an age where they want to, sell the company and enjoy their, the fruits of their labor. They may want to travel and do other things. So in order to do that, they hire someone like me to represent them and to try to find a buyer or a new financial partner for them. So, how do you do that? What our job is, or my job is, I'm responsible for telling their story to the marketplace. So what is their story? It's what does the company do? How long have they been doing it? What do they do successfully? Financially, is it a profitable business? And, also painting a picture of what someone, a new buyer might be able to do with the business under different ownership. Sometimes we find that owners, as they get a little bit older in years, and they're thinking about their exit, they don't necessarily invest in the business like they would if they were, just starting the company. So that's what we do. I think another way to think about it is if folks understand how houses get sold. You own a home. You may thinking about selling the home. You'd hire a real estate agent or broker to come in. They'd look around. They'd say, hey, if you're thinking about selling the business, you really might want to think about replacing the roof or changing the kitchen, because that'll enhance value when you bring that company to market. So we do that with businesses, right? So we give advice in terms of here's how to present the financials, here's how to tell the story, and we do that on their behalf. And then we, like a broker for selling of a home, we find qualified buyers to look at the business and point out all of their attributes, right? And then we bring that hopefully to a successful conclusion where we find a buyer and we can agree on price and a transaction takes place. So that's what I do as an investment banker.
Great, thank you very much for that explanation. Is that something that when you were in high school, is this something that you thought you would be doing? Is this a path that you thought you would be taking when you were a young man? You're shaking your head, no way.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, I'm in many ways, the reason I think these types of conversations are important is in high school, I was just trying to get through my classes, get to track practice, go home, get my homework done, and do it again the next day. So really not a lot of thought given to what's going to be next. By the time junior and senior year came around, I was good in math, pretty good in science. And so I thought, well, maybe engineering is something I might want to do. And I wasn't even sure what engineering was, but people told me that if you're good in math and you're good in science, that's something you should do. So I kind of went down that path, and quickly learned after my first year of organic chemistry in college that maybe I'm not as good in science as I thought I was, and it was just a little bit less interesting. But I will say this: I always had an interest in business. My parents owned a hardware store, a true mom and pop hardware store. It was called Higgins Hardware, and I grew up basically in the back of that store, going in with them 6 days a week, and you learn about what it means to interface with customers, solve problems, and be involved in business. So when I decided that engineering wasn't what I wanted to do, I my thoughts changed around, well, maybe I'd do something around business. And it wasn't until I think actually my thinking about this now, my wife, we were dating at the time, she told me about a program that basically gave you an opportunity to work at an investment bank over a summer and basically live the life of an investment banker for a summer. And so I did that in my junior year. And that was the introduction to investment banking. I really had no idea what it was, other than looking on online, or I think on the application at the time, and everything was hard copy. There was no online when I was at that point in my career. And just reading, and it looked interesting. It just seemed to be, you learn about business, you incorporated the stock market, right? Which is, I think you've got a program, in and around that. It's, I think excellent. So it just seemed interesting, and it required a lot of hard work, and the compensation was pretty good at the time. So that was my introduction to investment banking, and then I continued to just be interested in that throughout the rest of college. Took a position at American Express, not doing investment banking, but in finance. But then went back to business school and remained very interested in investment banking. So after business school, I graduated and took a position at a smaller investment banking boutique.
Sure. So you had a lot of stepping stones that have led you to Delancey Street Partners, which is where you are now.
Correct.
Let's talk about some of the positions that are at Delancey Street Partners. I know you have quite a staff there. Just tell me about a few of the jobs that are available at your organization.
Sure. So, the entry-level position is a financial analyst, right? So that was, that is someone who comes right out of undergrad. Usually they have a finance or accounting or some sort of a business or economics type background. Will have taken at least one accounting course because it's just accounting is really the language of business. So I encourage anyone who's thinking about business, accounting, it's not for everyone, but it is the language of business and worth taking a couple classes in. But anyway, the entry-level position is a financial analyst, and what their role is I say they're the first line of defense for me, right? They're responsible for doing industry research, doing financial modeling, so analyzing the financial results and presenting them in a way that is easy for a potential investor or buyer to digest. And they're active members of a deal team. Usually we have no more than 3 people on a deal team. So someone like me as a managing director is usually a vice president or an associate in between, and then the analyst, right? So the normal progression or the natural progression is for an analyst after 2 or 3 years, as they become proficient in that, with those skills, they become an associate. Ideally, they now have an analyst to work with, and the associate now takes a little bit more responsibility for, authoring a lot of the when I talked about telling the story of our clients, they begin, that authoring process, with my supervision, and they manage the analyst, and, they are eventually starting to play an active role in new business generation, going out and trying to meet business owners and talking about what their needs are and trying to find new business folks. So that's kind of the natural progression. And then once you become a managing director, my responsibility is to generate new business, and also help manage and execute any transaction that we bring forward, or engagement. I shouldn't say transaction, engagement.
Sure. It really sounds like there's a lot of mentorship, a lot of maybe younger people or people getting into this type of field that are being mentored, throughout the process. Can you tell me anything about a mentorship that you may have had in your career that was important to you to allow you to get to where you're at?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. I'd say, one of the things that everyone should do as they're progressing through their career is observe how everyone you interact with, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and try to take something from all of that and try to take the good stuff and incorporate that into who you are. So I think I've been lucky over the years to have come across a lot of individuals with different management styles. And, while I don't think I've had a specific, sorry, my phone's ringing, a specific mentor. Let me get this.
Yeah.
I haven't had a specific mentor, per se, who has guided me throughout my career. I have had a number of people that have been instrumental in my career and have taken an interest in my growth. And I think I'm fortunate to actually work with one of those individuals today at Delancey Street Partners. He's someone I started working with back in 2000. He hired me, and over the years we worked together on a number of different platforms. And I had an opportunity to kind of rejoin his organization about 2 years ago. And so mentors they're difficult to everyone wants a mentor, and sometimes you join organizations and they force a mentor on you. What I've found is that good mentors, it kind of happens naturally, and some of that I think you can in hindsight you can begin to develop some of those mentor relationships as the mentee. People like to talk about themselves, right? People like to ask about, learn, what made you successful? What were some of the things that you did, or what were some of the pitfalls that we should avoid? And if you're inquisitive and you ask, those individuals those questions, effectively they kind of become mentors for you. So you don't have to have one individual mentor. It's great if you can find that, but that isn't critical in my opinion, my experience.
Right. So it obviously with your job and your position, interpersonal skills and networking is very important. There's probably long nights where you're working on certain deals or having to go out to dinner and meet with people about certain things, clients. So tell me about some of the skills that you may look for when you're hiring someone, knowing that interpersonal skills, and maybe that is the most important thing, whether they're personable, how they relate to people. What are the most important characteristics you look for when hiring with your firm?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things we want to see is, do they demonstrate a level of intellectual curiosity? Do they want to learn, right? Because, one of the things that I'm constantly doing is learning about my clients, learning about new industries, and, that's critical. And usually that comes across during an interview with, there's always a point in the interview where, I've given you my background, you've given me yours, and I say, well, do you have any questions for me? And that's usually a very telling period, right? If someone says, well, no, I don't have any questions, thank you very much. Well, you're probably not going to, and for me, you're probably not going to get hired. We're not going to advance to the next round. I want to know that you've picked up something either from the conversation that I've had with you explaining my background, or that you've done some research in advance about my firm, about my industry, and ask me a question about that. A simple question could be, hey, tell me about, so you've talked about the role of an analyst How is it different at your firm versus maybe one of my a larger investment bank? Just so again, I think it's a level of curiosity and preparedness. There's so much information out there now via the internet and just Googling around. You can find out what it means to be an investment banker and get hundreds of articles. So I think one of the things that differentiates a lot of candidates is the level of work they've done preparing for that interview.
Sure. Let's talk about, I'm sure your job has long hours. You have time away from your family, meetings and like we had talked about. How do you balance your work and your personal life?
Well, it becomes easier as you get older, right? As an entry level position, it's a little bit more difficult because, for example, my son is interning with us this summer, right? And I was looking at him yesterday, and he seemed a little stressed. And he'd gotten pulled into a meeting, and it was a 2-hour meeting. He didn't plan for that, and he had a couple other projects that he was supposed to get done for that day. And now he was stressed out because 2 hours of his life, 2 hours of the day is now gone. He's got more work that came out of that 2-hour meeting, and he still has to get the other things done.
Sure.
Right. And all I could do, I just asked him what was going on. He told me, and I just smiled, because that's part of the job, particularly earlier on in your career. You don't always have control of your schedule and calendar. And, my recommendation to him was, look, what you have to do is, so what I always did is the night before, I tried to get as much off my plate as I could so that the next day, if someone hijacks my morning, right, I'm not as stressed because I got a lot of my stuff done. And then if no one hijacks my morning, well, it's a less stressful day.
Right.
So you have to learn how to manage that, right? So as you progress in your career, you begin to gain a little bit more control of that. And you also begin to just learn different ways to be effective and efficient, right?
Sure.
And someone told me, look, you got to figure out how to work smarter and not harder or longer hours. And so I, again, encourage everyone to, particularly early on in your careers, to try to figure that out. And what works for me doesn't work for someone else, but you got to continue to try to figure that out. That's
Sure.
a useful skill set. So how do I balance? I've got 2 kids. I try to stay engaged with their activities. They're both athletes, and so I could go to their games and then just focus on what it is they were doing. And nowadays with technology, you can always plug in later on in the afternoon or later on in the evening after the kids are in bed. But
Sure.
you figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that was my next question. What are your hobbies? What do you do to decompress and kind of take your mind off of, if there is time, what do you do to take your mind off of, all the stresses of life?
Yeah, look, I enjoy being with my family. I enjoy, again, watching my kids compete as athletes and doing that. And so I've had the good fortune of both kids are, been playing even in college. So that's good. But I also like just watching a good TV show, watching a good series. I was a big Game of Thrones, guy. I'm still now trying to find the next great series, and I don't want to invest any time in it until it's proven.
Sure.
Right. So I can binge watch and catch up. But those are the kind of things I do to try to decompress and try to remove myself from
awesome.
From the pressures of work.
So one last question for you. If investment banking was not in your life right now, is there any other career or any other thing that you could say, you know what, if this wasn't what it was going to be, I would love to be this?
I'll tell you what, I think, so one of the things I do, I serve on the board of a hospital system called Mainline Health. And it's really been just a fascinating experience. And it's opened up my eyes to the healthcare field. And there's so many changes taking place within healthcare at so many different levels, right? From the, where do you go for emergency services? right? It's no longer, the emergency room isn't necessarily the best place to go in many cases. Now there's urgent care, and there are clinics that are opening up, and in the Walgreens and the CVS and other places. So I think there's just there's a term called the consumerization of healthcare that's taking place. And increasingly, this is going to be it's a service that is being consumed like you consume a soda, right? You want it convenient, you want it when you want it, right? And so telemedicine, for example, is, I think, become a viable option, and really heightened awareness of that as a solution, with this pandemic that we've been going through. So that's just on the delivery side. There's so much technology in and around healthcare. Everyone's wearing an Apple Watch or some other wearable. Well, all of that's gathering a lot of information, health information, and it'll be interesting to see how that gets utilized and improves the quality of care. So if I could turn the clock back on my career, I would focus on healthcare, because I just think it's so dynamic and changing so rapidly. It's just kind of a fun place to spend time. So that's something I'd encourage folks to give some thought to. And there are lots of finance positions and other positions in and around healthcare.
Healthcare, absolutely.
As an industry.
Yeah. Steve, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, for the information. You've really allowed us all to kind of have a better understanding of what your job is and the importance of it in society. So we appreciate it very much.
Well, Karen, look, it's unfortunate that we couldn't be live, that we couldn't, receive questions. But I'd encourage folks. I think you're going to provide my contact information to folks, particularly high school kids that have questions, or teachers that have questions about, or that think that they've got students who may be interested in this field. Happy to spend a couple minutes and just expand a little bit more on what I was talking about today. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. We will be providing your information following this interview, and if anybody would like to reach out to Steve or to us to make that connection, we would certainly love to do so. Thanks for joining us.